This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Welcome to the Spoon Podcast, where we talk to the builders and makers on the front lines of the food tech revolution. I'm your host, Michael Wolf. This episode's guest is Cole Ashman, the CEO and co-founder of Pila Energy. As you know, if you listen to the podcast, I've been intrigued over the past year about this idea of how appliances can fit into the power network in the home. You've heard me talk to the CEOs of both Impulse and Copper about their battery-powered induction stoves. So on today's episode, I talk with Cole about his company's product, which takes the idea of whole home battery-powered backup and fractionalizes it, creating backup batteries for appliances like your fridge. Cole's background includes working on the Tesla Powerwall project and at Span, a maker of smart energy panels. I had a great time talking to him, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation as well. Cole will be speaking at the Smart Kitchen Summit in July, so if you want to hear him talk about kitchen electrification, ask him questions, make sure you get your ticket today. Go to smartkitchensummit.com. All right, let's get to my conversation with Cole Ashman. All right, tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Cole Ashman. I'm the founder and CEO of Pila Energy.
I'm excited to talk to you about your fractionalized, virtualized mesh batteries. This idea that you can essentially take a Powerwall and divide it into lots of different pieces is a really cool concept to me. I've been getting excited over the past year about this idea of adding batteries to appliances, and you guys are doing that in a really interesting way.
That's right. Yeah, we like to say we're taking the battery out of the garage and into the future. So you nailed it with that intro. You know, we're developing small batteries that can be placed where power is most important to you throughout your home, room by room, appliance by appliance, to not only provide backup power, but in the cases of important appliances like your refrigerator, actually upgrading that appliance and giving it new capabilities and interesting features.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Cole. How did you come around to starting a company where you're creating batteries for appliances?
Yeah, great question. Don't know if I would have predicted this on my bingo card 10 years ago, but my story, I grew up in New Orleans. So, I lived through Katrina and a lot of other storms that took power out for my family. And of course, the default for a lot of homes is to do nothing in a power outage, or you've got a generator. But seeing that impact to infrastructure and this kind of invisible force that keeps life going being shut down is eye-opening. That set me on a path to study engineering, and eventually I ended up really fortunately getting to work on the Tesla Powerwall at Tesla, developing products there globally to bring backup power into the home, to level up people's energy, help save money, produce energy at home and store it. And then most recently, I led the hardware product team at a company here in San Francisco called Span, who are most known for the smart electrical panel, upgrading the 100-year-old fuse box in your home. So I've had the fortune of spending time in this home energy space, and that led me to Pila ultimately.
That's like perfect background, working on Powerwalls, rethinking what this old electrical box, which most like we have a pretty old one. At some point I probably need to have an electrician come in, especially if I get that EV that I want. And You have had all that kind of background. And so you've probably started to think a lot about how people can use battery technology around the house. When I thought of Powerwalls, I've always wanted one, but they've always seemed way too expensive. Is that part of the reason like most people don't have them? And also I would have to actually bring an electrician in. Is that why?
I mean, you've already gotten there. Those are the friction points in addition to the 5-figure investment. So Powerwall, It's a fantastic product, and there's lots of options out there other than Powerwall today for smart home batteries. But if you don't own your home, if you don't have months of time to become a project manager for this major upgrade, and if you're not ready for that 5-figure investment, you don't get it. And it's unfortunate that by the numbers, we only have about 1/4 to 0.5% of US homes that have taken that quantum leap to home battery backup.
Which is tiny. That's a tiny amount of it's been around for 5 to 10 years. It's been around a while.
We launched in 2016.
Tiny fraction. Yeah.
And,
So
meanwhile,
only 1/4 to 0.5%.
1/4 to 0.5%.
Sorry.
Yeah. And meanwhile, what's happening is what? Power outages are getting worse across the country. Utility rates are kind of going up universally. And the best thing about these smart home batteries is they protect you in an outage automatically. Yes, sure. But even year round, they add value by helping save on bills, whether that's charging from solar
Yeah.
or giving you more insight into your energy usage. And it's way smarter than, the old school kind of generator options that collect dust, 99% of the time. So that was indeed a big part of our founding story for Pila, making this stuff more accessible.
And so when you started to think about the friction points, high cost, had to have an electrician come in, at one point, did you have this epiphany, or did you have an epiphany saying, hey, we can actually maybe reduce this friction, create like smaller little batteries that can attach to different appliances like the fridge? Because that's what I always think about, right? The fridge in a power outage. I'm always afraid to open up the freezer or open the fridge up because you want to keep it cool, especially if the power's going to be out for a day or two because you're going to lose all that food.
That's right. And when you think about what that food means from a financial standpoint, I mean, the average American fridge has something like $300 to $500 worth of food in it. If you look at the FDA recommendation, after 4 hours, they suggest you start throwing stuff out. So, big financial risk, there's health risks there. Absolutely, fridge is number one for power outage protection. And this was something we heard over and over again. Folks getting power walls just to back up the fridge, and especially if you have medicine in the fridge or other super high value perishables, whether it's meat that can't be replaced or these sort of things, then that value goes way up. So fridge was the focus for us kind of out of the gate, and that's really our hero use case.
It begs the question, why haven't there been big appliance brands, refrigerator makers that have backup battery? Maybe they have. I should be paying more attention. I should know this, but maybe there are some that, but I definitely don't think it's common. It seems like this should have been something that's maybe built in on a fridge.
You would think so. You would think so. And the answer is no. I think a lot of this is it's timing, right? Outages are more relevant than they ever have been.
Yeah.
But it's the classic story of companies that have, lost sort of innovative edge and really rethinking, which is, why it's fun to come in on the startup side and say, hey, why don't we do this completely differently? We have all of the Lego blocks. Battery prices are coming down. Wireless communication technology at the edge has been cost optimized as well and has unlocked the ability to upgrade these appliances. And we thought the same thing. Why is no one doing this? Of course, you have folks coming at it from the stovetop angle with some really innovative products there to help folks switch off of gas. But, for me, it's the resiliency, the backup power, energy security that I think really needs more attention. When that's what drove us to the refrigerator specifically. But
yeah,
I'll also take the opportunity to say it's not just for the fridge. The great thing about Pila is you can kind of spread it all across the home, from the sump pump to the window air condition to the home office. Anywhere you can plug a device in, you can use Pila.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's flexible. You can use it anywhere. And the idea is at some point you're creating a network of different batteries. And I think you're calling it actually a mesh power network, which I love that term. It's kind of borrowing a little bit from like what we've seen and we've learned from the past decade with the Eros of the world, the mesh Wi-Fi. So talk a little bit about that, how you can essentially create a virtualized power wall that maybe at some point, if you have enough of these, could back up your house.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll raise you one, not only a house, but what about the large multi-tenant buildings for which there are very few products for backup power today? We see the opportunity to turn those big buildings into big batteries by scaling energy storage across the property. And then the challenge becomes, how do you get those all to work together? There's a concept on the grid called virtual power plant, which is, hey, let's take all of these Powerwall garage-sized batteries and operate them together when the grid is in moments of stress and need to displace like a big natural gas plant or whatever it is. We're scaling that down to the home size and the building size. So our battery mesh network is all about operating batteries together to charge and discharge and manage energy like one system without the hassle of having to set each one up and program them separately that requires, an engineering. So much like mesh Wi-Fi, you can start with one, you can add more over time, and it just scales up and up and up.
So talk a little bit about how this works. Is the coordination, these things are working together and communicating, but there's not necessarily power going from one of these batteries back into the home power network, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, let's talk through a few examples. The easiest example would be, hey, let's say you have solar on site, on your roof, attached to your building. When that solar is producing, you want to store that solar energy so that you can use it at night or when solar is not producing. That's the most cost-effective way to produce and store energy. Alternatively, if you don't have solar, many of us now have time of use electricity rates where the cost of electricity actually changes depending on the time of day. So charging from cheap electricity, holding on to that, and then using that for, powering your fridge or whatever it is to avoid the expensive electricity can have bill savings for you over time. And if you want to realize that at the site level, you need these batteries kind of working together to charge and discharge. The other really important piece is making setup dead simple. It's not going to be a scalable product if you have to program your Wi-Fi credentials in at every step of the way for the 9th, the 10th, the 11th one of these that you add. And when you want to remove one or replace one, they need to automatically kind of recognize that change and remove all of that hassle from you. And again, that's the beauty of these Eero and other mesh Wi-Fi systems. And we're borrowing a lot of the lessons learned from there so that you can scale up coverage, make changes, and the hard parts are handled by the software side on our part. And your question about bidirectionality, much like the most modern electric vehicles today that are capable of exchanging power with the grid in both directions, our hardware is capable as well. It's a really unique part of our design. And we're really excited to see states like Utah, who just this month put legislation forward to pave the path to this bidirectional kind of solar battery operation via plug and play systems. So we're on the cusp of that in the US, and we're ready for it and excited to unlock that capability over time.
So if I had 5, 6, 7 of these in, a 2-3 bedroom house, could it essentially act as a backup? We're here in the Seattle market today, we're actually talking about like super high winds, 50 miles per hour. They're talking about power outages. And if I had a house with 5 or 6 of these, could I essentially back up my house power with this bidirectionality? Do I need to do anything in terms of like having an electrician come in, or will it just work?
So out of the gate, let's talk about setup. You plug it in, and then you plug in your devices to Pila. So power passes. When power goes out, the device recognizes automatically that power is gone. And in a split second, without the fridge or the appliance losing power, it provides backup power. And it'll tell you, via the screen on the device and via an app, how much time you have left and kind of manage that. That's the same for every room. So in a power outage, out of the box, each of these kind of backs up those individual, let's call them nanogrids throughout your house.
Yep.
And then when the grid is up, the mesh network allows them to do that 24/7, 365 value of saving you money on your bills, kind of putting a picture together of how you're using energy throughout your home. Stay tuned for more on the, whole home backup via bidirectionality. But, we're out of the gate kind of providing this focused backup power that only requires plugging the device in.
Okay. So right now it's essentially whatever's plugged into the battery, like the battery will be sitting on top of a fridge. That fridge is going to be backed up. But over time, you're saying you might have some level of bidirectionality that could maybe allow these virtually to connect to different appliances that aren't like right next to it and power it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not a technology problem, but we're very aware of the codes and standards around install and electrical systems, and it's a game of moving this forward intentionally with partners in the regulatory space and the utility space and the rest. And it's exciting to see that momentum building in the U.S. I think this idea of a solar system and a battery system that you own and you can take with you and moves with you and is way more appliance-like than, a fixed infrastructure on the wall that you're going to say goodbye to when you move. I think that idea, we've seen it take root in Europe, and the motions are starting here in the US.
For those who aren't familiar with what's going on in Utah, can you briefly give a little primer on what that is and why that's important?
Absolutely. Yeah, the trend to follow is often called balcony solar, has really, really taken root in Germany, where you as a renter or a homeowner can plug in Germany. It's up to 800 watts of solar panels, which might hang off of your balcony, and you produce power, and that helps offset your utility bill, right? So it helps with saving money. And if you have a battery, you can then, of course, add backup power and resiliency. So Utah, in March of this year, passed House Bill 340, which is beginning to pave the path for that functionality in the U.S. They've set a target of up to 1,200 watts, so higher than what's in Germany. And that's set a lot of conversations in motion in the energy space of how we're going to do this and how the codes and standards are going to evolve. So all these different regulatory agencies need to kind of move forward together. And what we've seen from Utah is the first step of that in 2025.
Is it essentially more of a DIY solar? I mean, I've had local folks come out, or salespeople ask about putting solar on my roof. They gave me like a high five-figure proposal, and then said, well, we're not even sure it's going to help you that much. And like, would have to take a second mortgage out to basically put the stuff on my roof. And so I think that this is probably disincentivizing a lot of people who maybe want solar. So is essentially this idea of balcony solar, a little more DIY, people can essentially hang their own essentially solar panels at their house?
That's right. Absolutely. It's DIY, okay. But it doesn't have to be cobbled together. These okay. are safe, tested, mass market ready products. But the beauty of it is that you own it. It's plug and play. And, in the case of adding a battery, you can add that backup power functionality too. Where this really, I think, is going to move the needle is for those styles of homes like multi-tenant, multi-family, to access, all of the energy savings and these benefits that they've traditionally not been able to unless, the building owner decides to invest in a big fixed solar and storage system. Very
interesting. So you mentioned earlier in the conversation some of the other players in the space that are adding battery. We've seen two in particular in the in induction stove side, Copper and Impulse. And I think you're probably, it's a small little industry. You guys are probably talking about it. At some point, do you see yourself maybe putting batteries in stoves, or are you guys always going to be these external batteries? Talk a little bit about other appliances you're eyeing in the future.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the future that I would love to see, which is I would love to walk down the aisles of, Home Depot and see every refrigerator and major appliance be battery enabled by default, much like most are now Wi-Fi enabled by default. I believe that batteries are that next up level for the appliances in our homes, which brings comfort benefits, convenience benefits, and then these savings benefits. Now, I'll level that up one more. I would like all of those appliances to be capable of working together across vendors and interoperable with not only your home, but with the grid. If we're going to dig all of these minerals and batteries out of the ground, we definitely don't want them sitting idle 99% of the time when there's so much benefit that we can deliver to the community at large by stabilizing the grid. And by the way, you're going to get paid for that functionality as well. So it's win-win. So I'm really, really excited to see these other folks in the space that are beginning to prove out, the market and the value proposition as well. And absolutely, if we're doing this right, we're doing this together and making these systems work intelligently and in an interconnected way so that you can realize value across the whole home. So the other piece is where backup power is needed isn't always next to an appliance. So think your den, your work from home space. I think we need flexible solutions kind of across the board.
So when you say you would like refrigerators or appliances to be backup ready, how is that different from what they are today? If you can, I'm assuming you could take your battery and plug it into your Samsung fridge or your Whirlpool fridge today. What more do these appliance makers need to do essentially besides adding and integrating the battery? What could they do?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the in the weeds kind of software, electrical architecture. How do you make it capable of working with the grid? Versus, a kind of glorified backup system that's bolted onto an appliance. So that interoperability piece, it's super interesting, and I won't get into all the details. But the other more important piece is probably software. How do we enable these devices to coordinate and be aware of when is energy expensive, when is it cheap, what's the solar system doing, what are my other resources in the home doing, EV charging and the rest to affect energy savings on your bill. And I think really importantly, to give people a picture of what's going on in their home. And we've talked a lot about backup power, we've talked about energy savings. The other piece is monitoring and insights. So it's not just about is my fridge powered, for example, but is my food safe? Is it at the optimal temperature? Do I need to call a maintenance person out? I mean, how many of us have reached into the fridge and it's been a little warm and you wonder what's going on? Is everything in here okay? So I think we can think about it, yes, from the energy angle, but also from the food safety angle and the appliance efficiency angle there's so much interesting data that we could be pulling from these appliances, and we're excited to show folks what that can look like.
I think it was maybe KBIS last year that GE Appliances showed up there and talked a lot about the power network. And it was an interesting thing because I think the same person who was essentially running the smart home was also overseeing the power network. So I am starting to see movement on the big appliance side where they're starting to talk about the story. I don't think everyone is. I haven't really heard it from like the Whirlpools of the world, but I do think this is becoming something that's increasingly on the radar of appliance brands. Are you having some interesting conversations with some of these appliance guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing that I can divulge today, but we've had a tremendous amount of interest from folks, let's say across home appliances and devices. The backup power game is complex. We've already touched on a number of topics from backfeeding to interoperating with solar and the grid. And, our team has the benefit of having built some of the most advanced products in this space. And we're converting all of that learnings and packing it into the package that is Pila. And for that reason, the battery module and the software intelligence have sparked some interesting conversations.
So when can I go out and buy a Pila battery? When will it be available and for what price?
Absolutely. So today you can go to our website, which is pilaenergy.com. We'll be shipping first customer units towards the end of 2025. But for folks that like what they see, like what they hear, if you want to be first, we're accepting $99 reservations. And what that does is locks in a discounted price of $999 and puts you, first on the list to be a Pila household. After we start shipping, our MSRP will be $12.99. So working our hardest to keep that entry cost as low as possible for folks who really need this type of product to provide that peace of mind and energy security.
And tell people exactly what they're getting. How much backup energy is there? How much is it holding? And then how long can it essentially power like a fridge?
Yeah, great questions. So the specs also on the website, 1.6 kilowatt hours. And this is a lithium iron phosphate battery. So the safe, tried and true technology that has been in power tools and the rest for years and years. The power output, 2.4 kilowatts, which peaks up to 7.8. And this is something we're really proud of because it ain't easy to start things like sump pumps and window air conditioned systems with, low cost, low power point backup systems. And then the integrations, we have smart temperature sensors that you can chuck in the fridge, think an AirTag type device to measure temperature, portable solar panels that you can plug in for that multi-day outage to recharge the battery, and some other awesome accessories on the outlet and expansion battery side. The default product, just to give all of that in context, would back up a standard refrigerator for about 32 hours, plus or minus. If you go down to mini fridge, you might double or triple that. If you've got the Sub-Zero premium system with the Pila battery and the cabinet above it, you might be talking more like 12 hours. But all of that information will be at your fingertips in the Pila app, exactly how much backup time you have. So you can plan your way through the outage.
Who do you think is going to be the typical customer? People that live in places where there's lots of like storms and power outages, or people who are like just affluent? Who do you see as the key customer here?
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say is we're really excited to work to bring down that upfront cost by partnering with folks like utilities who are, really excited to provide smart technology. So that's absolutely a goal of ours. $1,000 is a considered price, let's be honest. Our early customers, though, who have expressed a lot of interest, do fall into that category of, hey, I have a lot of outage, maybe multiple per year. Maybe they're long outages and either they can't get a whole home backup system. Again, maybe they rent, maybe they live in a condo, or maybe folks like yourself who have looked into it. And it's just such a tall order to go through that big home retrofit that you haven't taken the leap yet, and want to get started with backup power. Aside from that, we've heard interest across the board from fridge to, my home workstation to my terrarium and saltwater aquarium to sump pumps. I think, think about what you need to feel comfortable and operate your life, day to day, and what it would mean to lose power. I think most folks have experienced an outage at this point in the US. You'd be a statistical anomaly, actually, if you haven't. And our goal is to enable those folks with more solutions and ideally easier to get, install, set up, and get started with than what's out there today.
Well, this is exciting. I thought it's a cool product. Looking forward to hear how you guys develop it over time. Thanks, Cole.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, that's it. Do you want to get a battery backup for your fridge yet? I know I do. I think it's an interesting concept and looking forward to hearing more about Pila and their product evolution. As I said at the top of the show, if you haven't already, go to smartkitchensummit.com. We have folks like Cole and lots of others coming to talk about what they are doing to build the future. So get your ticket today, smartkitchensummit.com. All right, folks, we'll talk to y'all soon.
If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? And don't forget to give us a 5-star review. You'll find more content like this on thespoon.tech/podcasts.